Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Tan. Welcome to my podcast with my advice on buying a keyboard. As a piano teacher, this is a question I get a lot. There are a lot of options out there, and I have some pointers. First off, I have a lot of younger students who are stone cold beginners or they're fairly new to the piano. When the person playing the keyboard is a stone cold newbie, don't spend a ton of money if you don't have to. Quite frankly, they might decide that the piano isn't their thing and quit after a few months. Now, I've had families who have inherited pianos and came to me for lessons as a result, and that's totally fine, of course. If a Steinway Grand falls into your lap, by all means, use it. There's no true substitute for a real piano, although some digital keyboards come closer than others. So with my students, there's beginners, and then there are students who've been playing for a while, but frankly, they don't have a good keyboard. This video could possibly provide some advice on upgrading as well for people who already have a keyboard but are thinking about upgrading. The biggest point I want to make is that if your keyboard isn't what they call touch sensitive, it's time for an upgrade. Some of the families I work with will go for a cheap model that doesn't have that kind of functionality, that is, the ability to control dynamics with your fingers. This feature is essential, and anything less is quite frankly just a toy. Quick history lesson that I've actually used with many of my students. The whole point of the piano was that it was the upgrade from the harpsichord. The original name was the forte piano, entirely because the keys could be played loud, forte, and soft, piano. Without control of dynamics, you're buying a digital harpsichord. And quite frankly, if you can afford my lessons, you can also afford a decent keyboard. So I really want to make this worthwhile. If you're starting by Googling keyboards, perfectly valid way to start. Search for touch-sensitive keyboard right away. By the way, I'm currently self-employed and have no business connections to any keyboard manufacturers. I'm speaking entirely from experience, just so you know. So taking a look, we have the Akai mini keyboard controller, bringing me to another point to keep in mind. Don't buy a controller unless you're only going to use it with your computer. Got to know the difference between a keyboard and a MIDI controller. A MIDI controller is a keyboard made for plugging into your computer and making electronic music. And making digital music is all well and good. I've made some electronic music myself, but for the sake of convenience and versatility, and if you're watching this video, you probably want something with some speakers as well. A piece of hardware with some built-in sounds. And a lot of these keyboards also have what they call MIDI out, meaning you get to have your cake and eat it too. It has both your built-in sounds that come out of your speakers and MIDI controller functionality. So much like computers, cars, phones, and TVs, these keyboards have gotten more advanced over time, and as a result, the older or less functional models have become more affordable. The Hamser 61 key is not a model that I've tried out myself, but it looks to be a promising model for under $100. This is something I could recommend for a starting student. It's affordable with a lot of functionality. You've got control of dynamics, and this is something you could hold on to for a while. It appears to have a pretty decent music stand as well, which is something to consider. Quite frankly, the music stand is why I don't recommend Casio keyboards. I think the Casio keyboards themselves are pretty decent for beginning students, but the music stands are just awful. Really poorly designed, and they're going to cause way more hassle than if you went with another brand. Another important point is regarding maintenance of these machines. These keyboards will likely run on both battery and AC power, and just trust me on this one, don't trust the batteries. Not only do the batteries eventually die out, of course, but sometimes they'll just straight up ruin the keyboard as well. I've had a lot of horror stories about that. Your AC adapter is a much better bet, but with that, always have a backup adapter with the same voltage and that's compatible with your keyboard. Especially if you're like me and you're a gigging musician and you're taking these keyboards all over the place, these adapters are going to break really, really easily. Always have a backup. If the people using these keyboards are young kids, enough said about the importance of maintenance. In my performing experience, it's not the keyboards themselves that really break down. It's the adapters, the pedals, and the cables that I plug into the keyboard. I can't tell you how many times I've plugged in my keyboard and it didn't turn on, or the power faded in and out. And when this happens, don't panic, because usually in these situations, it's not the keyboard, it's the adapter. So that's why you gotta have a spare. So as far as starter kit advice goes, these are what I think are the most important things to consider. Make sure your model has touch sensitive keys, get some AC adapters to power it, and look into getting a model with a decent music stand as well. And beyond these points, you can read promising info online, but you're not truly going to get a sense of any model of keyboard unless you try it out yourself. So I also recommend that you visit a local store that sells keyboards so you can try this stuff in person. Guitar Center is likely where you would go for something like this. Be aware that retail employees might be working on commission. They might try to upsell you. Remember, it depends on what you're looking for, depends on who's going to be playing this keyboard. Again, if the person playing this keyboard is a total beginner who might quit in a matter of months, in this situation, save your money. So these are what I think are the essential points in buying a keyboard. And beyond that, it's really a matter of what you want out of your machine. A lot of affordable models have different voices, or they have MIDI out so you can plug into the computer. If it's in your power to go more high end, then we're getting into weighted keys. So that's like the next step, going from touch sensitive, where the keys are going to feel very much like playing the real piano, and you get a more realistic sound, more realistic feel to it. And I think it's a great buy if you're primarily using the piano sound. But if you're like me and you like to switch to voices like electric piano or organ or synthesizer or what have you, weighted keys might not really be necessary. So again, there are no corporate interests involved in this podcast, so I'd approve of any number of decent, affordable keyboards. There's a lot of stuff out there that will probably get the job done for what you're looking for, but personally, I like Yamaha keyboards because they're an established company that makes highly functional products at a variety of price points. In fact, the Yamaha company has been around for a lot longer than you may realize. They actually started out way back in 1887 as a maker of keyboard instruments. So believe it or not, keyboards are where it all started for this enormous company that has since expanded into making countless other products. They've got really good keyboards for under $200 for the consumer level. And at the professional level, they're making grand pianos that you can find at concert halls. The likes of Elton John and Paul McCartney are touring the world with Yamaha pianos. So again, personally, I recommend Yamaha because they have this enormous legacy tied to keyboard instruments, and I like that the technology that they're using in their high-end products is the same being used for their products being made for the consumer level. So I hope you found this presentation helpful, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions about this subject. This is Mr. Tan, over and out.